In the heart of Redemption's dusty Main Street, under a relentless sun that baked the earth like an oven, stood the auction block, a crude platform of weathered wood that had seen its share of cattle drives and land sales. But on this sweltering afternoon in the late 1800s, what was up for bid wasn't livestock or property deeds. It was a woman, bound in heavy chains that clanked with every shift of her weight, her once pristine white habit now marred by the red dust of the trail and the grime of captivity. Sister Eleanor stood there, her head held high despite the humiliation, as rough men in sweat-soaked shirts hollered bids, like she was no more than a prize heifer at market. The air was thick with the scent of tobacco smoke, cheap whiskey, and unwashed bodies, a far cry from the serene convents where she had spent her life in quiet devotion. Elijah Kane lounged against the rough-hewn doorframe of the Silver Spur Saloon, a half-empty glass of rye whiskey in his calloused hand. The liquor burned its way down his throat, a familiar fire that usually dulled the edges of the world. He had 32 notches on his gun belt, each one a ghost from gunfights won in forgotten towns across the frontier. But this spectacle unfolding before him twisted something deep in his gut, a nausea that no amount of drink could chase away. He'd seen men die in the dirt for less honor, gold, a sideways glance but auctioning off a nun. That was a new low, even for a god-forsaken place like Redemption. The auctioneer, a burly man named Harlan Bishop with a belly that strained against his stained vest and a voice like gravel under boot heels, gripped Sister Eleanor's chin roughly, forcing her face toward the leering crowd. "Take a gander at this fine specimen, gentlemen, fresh out of the cloister, pure as the driven snow on the Rockies. What'll you give me for this devout beauty? She's been schooled in obedience by the Almighty himself. Imagine what she could do for you." Sister Eleanor's eyes, a striking shade of hazel that seemed to hold the calm of distant horizons, scanned the crowd without flinching. No tears stained her cheeks, no pleas escaped her lips. Instead, she exuded a quiet dignity that stood in stark contrast to the chaos around her. Her gaze locked onto Elijah's across the throng of bidders, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Her lips moved subtly, perhaps in silent prayer, but there was a spark in her eyes, a challenge, almost that pierced through the haze of his whiskey-fueled apathy. It reminded him of long-buried memories, of a time when he still believed in saving the innocent, before the weight of his kills had turned his heart to stone. Elijah straightened, his free hand drifting instinctively to the pearl-handled Colt revolver holstered at his hip. He'd vowed years ago to stop playing the hero. Too many graves dotted the trails behind him, filled with fools who thought they could change the world with a gun. But this woman, unbroken amid the degradation, stirred echoes of a failure. He couldn't forget a young girl he'd promised to protect, lost to the flames of a raid he arrived too late to stop. The whiskey in his veins turned from sedative to spark, igniting a rage he thought he'd drowned. $50, bellowed a rancher with a beard matted in tobacco juice, his eyes gleaming with base hunger. $75, countered another, a miner with calloused hands and a leer that spoke of Sunday dinners eyed like conquests. Harlan Bishop's face split into a greasy grin, his yellowed teeth flashing. "Now we're talking, boys. This here's premium goods raised in the house of the Lord, trained to follow commands without question. Keep those bids coming." Elijah's jaw tightened, the muscle twitching under his stubbled skin. The alcohol wasn't numbing the scene anymore. It was amplifying it, turning his stomach into a churning sea. He'd gunned down men for far lesser offenses, insults slung in saloons, cheats at poker tables, but this mockery of decency gnawed at him like a coyote on bone. The bidding surged, 80, 90, then $100 echoed through the street. Sister Eleanor's slender fingers clutched the small silver cross dangling from her neck, a simple talisman of her faith. Her lips moved again, whispering verses that no one else could hear, clinging to belief in a higher power amid the earthly hell. That's when Elijah made his choice, one that would unravel lives like a frayed rope. He stepped off the saloon's porch, his spurred boots thudding against the packed dirt, drawing every eye in the crowd. The air grew thick with tension. Folks in these parts knew Elijah Kane, by reputation a shadow that brought death quicker than a rattlesnake strike. Whispers rippled through the bidders. "That's Kane, the one who cleared out the Dalton gang single-handed." $200, Elijah announced, his voice slicing through the din like a sharpened blade. A hush fell over the street. Harlan Bishop's hammer hovered in midair, his beady eyes widening not just at the sum more than most he earned in months, but at the man who'd uttered it. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a bubble around Elijah as if he carried plague. But before the auctioneer could slam down the gavel, a new voice shattered the silence, raspy and laced with malice. 500. The bidder emerged from the shadow of an ornate black carriage parked at the street's edge. Victor Hawthorne, clad in a tailored suit of fine wool, his teeth glinting with gold caps that rumor said were pried from the mouths of his enemies. Hawthorne controlled vast swaths of the territory through intimidation and bloodshed, his empire built on stolen mines and burned-out homesteads. Elijah's chest constricted. Of all the devils to cross paths with, it had to be Hawthorne, the very man who'd torched the orphanage in Willow Creek, because the caretaker wouldn't pay protection fees. Well, Hawthorne drawled, leaning on his ebony cane topped with a silver wolf's head. Elijah Kane, the reluctant knight. How quaint. Sister Eleanor's gaze flickered between the two men, and for the first time, a shadow of fear crept into her composed features. She might not know Hawthorne by name, but the aura of corruption clinging to him was unmistakable. Like the stench of decay in a graveyard, Elijah advanced toward the platform, his hand hovering near his gun. This woman's not for sale to scum like you, Hawthorne. Everything has a price, Gunslinger, Hawthorne replied, his gold teeth flashing in a predatory smile. Especially in my domain. Hawthorne's enforcers materialized from the Alley 7 hard men with scarred faces and loaded rifles, loyal to their boss for the promise of coin and carnage. The crowd retreated further, sensing the brewing storm. Harlan Bishop glanced nervously between the titans, his bravado wilting like a flower in drought. 600, Hawthorne bid, his eyes locked on Elijah's, unblinking. Elijah assessed his pouch perhaps to 150 at most, scraps from a bounty in Wyoming. Against Hawthorne's wealth, it was pebbles against boulders. But then Sister Eleanor broke her silence, her voice a soft plea that carried like wind through the stillness. Please, don't let him have me. Those words struck Elijah like a hammer to anvil, echoing the desperate cry of another woman from his past, one he'd failed to heed in time. The memory flooded him, his fiancée, Amelia, begging for rescue as outlaws dragged her away during a bank heist gone wrong. He'd been too slow, too cautious, and she'd paid with her life. Not again. In a fluid motion, Elijah drew his Colt, leveling it at Harlan Bishop's sweat-drenched brow. Auction's done. Hawthorne's laughter boomed, echoing off the adobe walls. Stealing my purchase, Kane? In my territory? Your territory, Elijah snarled, keeping his aim steady. Last I heard, this was still the United States. Not in practice, Hawthorne countered, signaling his men. Guns cocked in unison, and Elijah knew he'd ignited a fuse he couldn't snuff. 7 against Oniads that would make any sane man flee. But the fire in Sister Eleanor's eyes had rekindled a dormant resolve. The first shot cracked from Hawthorne's flank, splintering the saloon sign above Elijah's head. He dove behind a rain barrel, wood shards flying as bullets peppered his cover. Sister Eleanor's chains rattled as she crouched low on the platform, her breath sharp and fearful. Take him breathing, Hawthorne bellowed. I want him to see what I do to his holy prize. Elijah rolled left, using a horse trough for shield, his mind mapping the battlefield, 3 advancing from the east to holding by the bank, 1 circling west. Bullets whizzed, ricocheting off iron hitches. Then, amid the mayhem, Sister Eleanor began to sing a hymn, Shall We Gather at the River, her voice rising pure and unwavering above the roar. The gunfire faltered, then ceased. Even these hardened souls paused, touched by the ethereal melody, remnants of Sunday school lessons stirring in their blackened hearts. Elijah seized the pause, bolting toward the platform. He fired twice. 1 thug clutched his knee and fell. Another scrambled behind a cart. Reaching Sister Eleanor, he yanked at her chains, but Harlan Bishop lunged, pressing a derringer to her temple. Freeze, Kane, or her brains decorate the dirt. Elijah halted, gun half raised. Sister Eleanor's song trailed off, her eyes meeting his with serene acceptance. Wise, Hawthorne mocked, striding forward. Drop it, and we'll negotiate like gentlemen. Sweat beaded on Elijah's forehead. Rushing meant her death, surrender, his own. But in her gaze, he saw trust earned, yet profound. He lowered his weapon, kicking it away. Hawthorne's triumph gleamed. Pathetic. The great Elijah Cain, softened by a skirt. But Elijah grinned at a wolf's smile. Harlan's hand trembled on the derringer, the man a coward with a twitchy finger. You assume I carry just one? Pat him down, Hawthorne ordered. Before they could, Sister Eleanor acted. She seized Harlan's wrist and sank her teeth into his flesh. He howled, the derringer discharging skyward. She wrenched free as Elijah hurled his boot knife, embedding it in Harlan's throat. The auctioneer collapsed, gurgling. Pandemonium reignited. Elijah grabbed Sister Eleanor's hand, dragging her toward the mercantile. Bullets chewed the doorframe as they burst inside, slamming the barrier shut. Panting against the wall, her habit bloodied, Sister Eleanor met his eyes with newfound fire. Why risk everything for me? Because no one deserves Hawthorne's fate for you, Elijah replied, reloading hastily. And you're not as helpless as you seem. She glanced at her hands, still shaking. I was raised in peace, in prayer. But when I bit him, when I felt him fall, there was a satisfaction I can't deny. The admission lingered, heavy as gun smoke. Outside, Hawthorne's men encircled the building. Elijah studied her. The serene nun was fading, replaced by something raw human. Do you regret it? He asked. She paused, listening to footsteps on the porch. My teachings say yes, but no. Does that damn me? Makes you alive, Elijah said. The world's not black and white, shades of blood and dust. Her question cut deep. Is that how you became this? Choosing survival over sanctity? Memories surged, Amelia's screams, the outlaw's laughter, his vengeance that left bodies in his wake. If you were Elijah, would you confess your scars, risking her fragile faith, or shield her with lies? He chose truth, partially. Sometimes, the Lord aids those who act. The door shattered, Hawthorne entering with a double-barreled shotgun. Game over, Cain. You and your saint are mine. Elijah shielded her, mind racing. Too distant to charge, too near to dodge. Hawthorne smirked. Amusanjai wasn't here for her initially. Supplies run. But seeing you play hero? Irresistible. Sister Eleanor stepped out. Take me. Spare him. Charming, Hawthorne chuckled. But no. Cain cost me men and Blackridge torched a warehouse full of kids for defying me. Her whisper, you saved children? Killed killers, Elijah corrected. It's my trade. Her touch on his arm, more than that. Hawthorne raised the gun. Kneel. Then the rear door creaked. Abigail Harlan, the storekeeper, elderly but fierce, leveled an ancient Winchester. Victor Hawthorne, vacate my premises now. All eyes turned. Abigail, stay out. Like tarnation I will, she snapped. This is my domain, oh bloodshed inside. And that girl's from St. Cecilia Assister and Eleanor, right? Sister Eleanor's shock. You know me? Your ma, Eliza Thorne, birthed you here during a flood 28 years back. Prayed you'd find grace. Hawthorne tightened his grip. Sentimental, but irrelevant. Over my corpse, Abigail vowed. The tension coiled, three-armed, lives hanging by threads. But unknown to them, Sister Eleanor's true identity loomed. A revelation that would shatter illusions. Her pallor grew. Mrs. Harlan, you're mistaken. Abigail squinted. No mistake your mother's eyes, father's jaw. Eliza wed that drifter, Samuel Reed, against advice. Sister Eleanor's tremor. Parents perished young. Convent raised me. They spun tales to shield you, Abigail said. Father fled for rustling. Mother died birthing your brother. Brother, Sister Eleanor whispered. Luke Reed vicious as a wolverine, runs with bandits, calls himself Lightning Luke. Elijah chilled. Luke Reed was infamous, a slayer of sheriffs and innocents alike. Sister Eleanor slumped. No, I've lived for peace, prayer. While your kin sows chaos, Hawthorne interjected. Intriguing. Abigail pressed. Luke hit my coach last week, but spared one to message for my sister. Elijah pieced it. The auction was bait. You orchestrated this, he accused Hawthorne. Guilty, Hawthorne admitted. Drew Luke out, but got you instead. Sister Eleanor's hollow. He's coming for me. Already here, Hawthorne nodded to the shadows. Sniping from the steeple. Hooves thundered riders approaching. Abigail muttered, Luke and his crew. Mercy. Elijah eyed Sister Eleanor. Faith versus Bluta war brewing. The hoof beats neared, a whistle piercing Luke's signal. Sister Eleanor peered out, 6 riders in dark garb, led by a lithe figure. Luke, she breathed. Timely, Hawthorne said. Outside, Luke's call. Hawthorne, release my sister or die slow. Elijah reloaded, for bullets against odds. Sister Eleanor resolved, I'll face him. No, Elijah gripped. He's family, perhaps redeemable. No redemption in Luke, Abigail warned. She pulled away. Enough death on my account. Elijah blocked. Confronting him means facing your heritage, not saint. But read. Violence in your veins. The words stung, but she stood firm. Time to embrace it. Luke shouted, 5 seconds. Sister Eleanor lifted Elijah's discarded Colt, handling it expertly. Abigail, where'd you learn that? Some legacies persist, she said sadly. Luke taught me young, before vows. She advanced, Elijah realizing the saved was savior. Sister Eleanor stepped through the splintered doorway of the mercantile, emerging into the sun-baked street of redemption with a vision that blended sanctity and steel in equal measure. The once serene nun, her white habit now a canvas of dust, bloodstains, and the invisible weight of revelations, held the Colt revolver with a poise that betrayed years of suppressed familiarity. The grip felt like an old sin resurfacing, cold metal against her skin that had known only the touch of prayer books and rosaries. The air was charged with the acrid scent of spent cartridges and impending rain. Dark clouds gathering on the horizon, as if the heavens themselves were preparing to witness the clash of blood ties and chosen paths. 30 yards separated her from the riders, a distance that in the unwritten laws of the West could be the difference between a heartbeat and eternity. Luke Reed, her brother, eased his black stallion to a halt at the forefront of his gang, his gloved hand casually lowering the bandana that masked his features. The face that revealed itself was a haunting mirror to hers, the same hazel eyes that could pierce souls, but hardened by a decade of lawless trails, etched with scars from knife duels and barroom melees. A faint mustache curled at the edges of his thin lips, curled in what might have been amusement or nostalgia, but carried an undercurrent of lethal promise. He was clad in a weathered duster coat, his gun belt slung low with tapir-inlaid pistols that had earned him the fear of sheriffs. From Texas to Montana, Ellie, he drawled, using the diminutive from their orphan childhood days when they'd shared scraps of bread and dreams of escape. Look at you. They've turned you into their puppet. Come on, sis, wear blood. Let's vanish into the wind. But Sister Eleanor held her ground, her voice projecting across the empty street with a resonance forged in convent chapels, now tempered by the fire of self-realization. I've seen the truth, Luke, about us, about the blood we share means. I'm not your little sister hiding in the shadows anymore. I'm not fleeing from you, from what our name represents. Luke's hand hovered near his holster, fingers twitching with the reflexes of a man who'd never been bested in a quick draw. His four remaining Ritter-shardened outlaws with faces like wine-scoured canyons. Rifles at the ready shifted uneasily in their saddles, their horses snorting clouds of dust. You're my kin, Ellie. That's the only thing that holds water out here. These folks them with their badges and Bibles, they've poisoned you against your own. Behind her, Elijah Kane slipped out from the mercantile's shadows, his boots soft on the wooden steps to avoid alerting the posse. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, swept the scene, Luke Central, to riders to his east flanking him, to the west, all with Winchesters cocked and eyes gleaming with predatory intent. Abigail Harlan followed, her ancient Winchester steady in her gnarled hands, her expression a fortress of frontier tenacity. Victor Hawthorne lingered in the threshold, his double-barreled shotgun poised, his gold-capped teeth catching the fading light like omens of greed. The street had morphed into a volatile stage, where one errant twitch could unleash a symphony of gunfire. Elijah's pulse thrummed, his mind cataloging escape vectors, the livery stable 40 yards north, a potential bolt for horses, the bank to the south for brick-walled cover. But with Hawthorne at their backs, they were hemmed in like cattle before the brand. Sister Eleanor, he muttered to himself, counting his sparse ammunition, 3 rounds chambered. A gambler's hope against a stacked deck. You were always the pure one, Ellie, Luke said, his tone laced with a sibling's resentment mixed with reluctant pride. Too good for the dirt we crawled from. But purity don't feed you in this world. It starves you. You know that deep down. Come with us, we'll make it like old times, you and me against the territories. A flicker of memory surfaced in Sister Eleanor's mind. Childhood games in the scrub brush. Outside their ramshackle home. Luke teaching her to handle a derringer pilfered from their father's trunk, laughing as she hit tin cans with surprising accuracy. Those times ended when I chose the cloth, Luke. To heal, to forgive. But today, I've learned that forgiveness sometimes requires a reckoning. Elijah tensed, his hand inching toward his backup PC, a small caliber revolver tucked in his belt. He whispered to Abigail, if it erupts, aim for the mount, scatter them. Hawthorne's chuckle slithered from the air. Touching family drama. But I've got unfinished accounts with your brother, sister. He filched my or shipment left bodies in the canyon. This ends with him in irons or earth. Luke's eyes narrowed to slits, his horse shifting beneath him as he addressed the group. Hawthorne, you snake. I know what you did using my blood as lure. Send her over, and maybe I'll grant you a head start before I burn your empire to ash. The standoff stretched, wind whistling through the eaves like a harbinger. No more running, Luke. This stops here. Join Mettern from the killing road. There's still light in you, brother. I believe it. Luke's laugh was hollow, echoing off the false fronts of the buildings. Light. That's for folks like you, Ellie. Me. I'm the dark that makes stars visible. But if you're choosing them over blood, his hand blurred, drawing his pistol in a motion so swift it seemed preternatural. The crack of gunfire splitting the afternoon. But Sister Eleanor anticipated, her own shot ringing out a heartbeat sooner. The bullet grazed Luke's gun hand, sending his revolver flying from his grasp in a spray of blood. The weapon skidding into the dirt. He reeled in the saddle, clutching his mangled fingers, his face contorted in disbelief and agony. Damn it, Elia winged me. Your own brother? I aimed for the hand, she said, her voice unwavering though tears traced salty paths down her cheeks. You'll heal. But the murdering stops today. Luke's gang surged, rifles barking as they unleashed a barrage. Elijah dove forward, firing to precise shots that felled one rider from his horse, the man crumpling with a guttural cry. Abigail's Winchester boomed, her aim true from years of defending her store against rustlers. Another outlaw clutched his shoulder and toppled, his mount bolting in panic. Bullets whizzed, splintering the mercantile's sign and kicking up puffs of dust at their feet. Sister Eleanor dropped to a knee, returning fire with measured pulls of the trigger, her shots forcing the remaining two riders to wheel their horses for cover behind a water trough. Stay down, she shouted to Elijah, her convent-trained composure cracking under the adrenaline, revealing the Reed lineage's innate marksmanship. Hawthorne, seeing the tide shift, leveled his shotgun at Luke's exposed back. Time to collect, Reed. But Elijah tackled him from the side, the blast discharging harmlessly into the sky. Buckshot peppering the clouds, they rolled in the dirt, fists flying in a brutal melee. Elijah's experience against Hawthorne's raw cunning. You set this trap, Elijah growled, landing a punch to Hawthorne's jaw, but you won't reap it. Abigail reloaded swiftly, her elderly frame belying her speed, and fired a warning shot over the cowering gang members. Ride out now, boys, or join your pals in the Boot Hill. The two survivors exchanged glances, eyed their wounded leaders slumped in the saddle, and spurred their horses, galloping out of redemption in a cloud of dust. Abandoning Luke to his fate, Luke slid from his mount, kneeling in the street, blood dripping from his hand onto the parched earth. Ellie, why? We're family. Sister Eleanor approached cautiously, the Colt still trained on him, her eyes a storm of conflict love for the boy he'd been warring with, horror at the monster he'd become. Family doesn't mean excusing slaughter, Luke. You've left trails of widows and orphans, but I won't let them hang you. Turn yourself and seek redemption. Elijah disentangled from Hawthorne, pinning the tycoon face down with a knee to his back, wrenching the shotgun free. Sheriff's on the way, hard the shots. This ends clean. Hawthorne spat dirt, his gold teeth gritted. You think you've won, Kane? My reach extends beyond this speck of a town. I'll see you all buried. Abigail stepped forward, rifle steady. Not today, Victor. Folks here are tired of your shadow. As the dust settled, Sister Eleanor lowered her weapon, the weight of her actions crashing down. She'd fired on her own kin, drawn blood to staunch greater violence. The convent's teachings echoed in her mind. Thou shalt not kill, turn the other cheek. Yet here she stood, gun smoke curling from the barrel, a sense of justice burning brighter than regret. What have I become? She whispered, the cross at her neck feeling heavier, a symbol now of tested faith rather than blind devotion. Elijah rose, binding Hawthorne's wrists with a length of rope from the mercantile. You've become what the world demanded, strong. Not evil, just real. Luke looked up at his sister, pain etching his features beyond the physical wound. You shot true, Ellie. Better than I taught you. Maybe there's something to your path. The distant sound of hoof beats announced the sheriff and his deputies, drawn by the gunfire like moths to flame. Redemption's Main Street, once a stage for auctioned innocence, now bore witness to a family's fracture and fragile hope for mending. As the lawmen arrived, cuffing Luke and Hawthorne, Sister Eleanor handed the Colt back to Elijah, her hands trembling not from fear but from the rush of empowerment. I thought faith meant passivity, she said softly, but perhaps it's the courage to act against wrong. Elijah nodded, holstering the gun. Faith without works is dead, or so the good book says. You saved us all today. Abigail smiled faintly, lowering her rifle. Your ma would be proud, child. She always said you had fire under that calm. The prisoners were led away, Luke casting one last glance at his sister, a mix of betrayal and begrudging respect, Hawthorne cursing under his breath, his empire's cracks exposed. The townsfolk, who had watched from shuttered windows, began to emerge, whispers turning to murmurs of approval. A nun with a gun? A gunslinger turned guardian? It was the stuff of legends, fodder for saloon tales across the frontier. But as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, Sister Eleanor felt the pull of uncertainty. The convent called her back to vows of peace. Yet the day's events had awakened a dormant part of her soul-threed resilience, the capacity for righteous force. What now? She asked Elijah as they stood on the mercantile porch, watching the sheriff's posse ride out. Now, he replied, his voice gravelly from the fight, we rebuild. You stay or Gothit's your cross to bear. But know this, you didn't lose your faith, you expanded it. That night, under a canopy of stars that seemed closer in the vast western sky, Sister Eleanor sat by a flickering lantern in Abigail's back room, her habit shed for a simple cotton dress borrowed from the store's stock. The wooden cross still hung around her neck, a tether to her past, but her mind raced with questions. Had violence tainted her soul irreparably? Or was it a tool like prayer in the hands of the just? The debate raged within, mirroring the moral quandaries that plagued many on the frontier where law was thin, and survival often demanded blood. Elijah joined her, nursing a bruised knuckle with a damp cloth. Penny for your thoughts. She met his gaze, the hazel eyes reflecting the lamp's glow. I wonder if God forgives the necessary sins. Today, I chose action over inaction, and it saved lives. But at what cost to my vows? He leaned back, his silhouette etched against the wall. I've wrestled that demon for years, killed men who deserved it, but each one chips away at you. Yet, letting evil flourish, that's a greater sin. Your shot disarmed didn't kill, that's mercy in disguise. Abigail entered, carrying mugs of steaming coffee. Listen to the man, child. I've seen enough years to know the West don't reward the meek. Your brother chose vengeance, you chose justice. There's a chasm between them. As they talked into the wee hours, the conversation delved deeper into the ethics of violence. When does self-defense cross into vigilantism? Is blood ties an excuse for complicity? Sister Eleanor's story became a microcosm of the American frontier's soul-searching, where immigrants, outlaws, and settlers grappled with building a nation on land soaked in conflict. The following days brought a semblance of normalcy to redemption. With Hawthorne in custody, his grip on the town loosened, miners and ranchers breathed easier. No longer paying extortionate fees, Luke awaited trial in the territorial jail, his gun hand bandaged, his spirit perhaps cracked by his sister's stand. Whispers spread of reform. Abe, the notorious Lightning Luke, could find a path back, influenced by the sibling he'd underestimated. Sister Eleanor assisted Abigail in the mercantile, her hands finding purpose in stocking shelves and aiding customers. A far cry from cloistered prayers, but fulfilling in its tangibility. Elijah lingered, his wandering ways paused by an unspoken bond. He repaired the shot-up storefront, his hammer strikes rhythmic like a heartbeat reviving the town. Yet tension simmered. Hawthorne's associates shadowy figures from neighboring counties, sent veiled threats via riders at dusk, hinting at retribution. "The boss don't forget," one snarled before vanishing into the night. Elijah patrolled the streets, his Colt ever ready, while Sister Eleanor practiced discreetly with a borrowed pistol, her accuracy improving under Elijah's tutelage. One evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, a storm mirroring the one in her heart, Sister Eleanor confronted Elijah on the porch. "Do you regret the lives you've taken? Does the weight ever lift?" He stared at the horizon, lightning flashing like divine judgment. "Regret, every one. But I'd do it again to protect the innocent. Like Amelia me lost love. Outlaws took her, I avenged her. It didn't bring peace, but it stopped them from hurting others." Her hand touched his arm, a gesture of shared burden. "And me? Am I just another to save?" "You're more," he admitted. "You remind me there's good worth fighting for." Their moment was interrupted by a rider galloping in a deputy with news. Hawthorne had escaped en route to the capital, killing 2 guards. "He's coming back, with reinforcements. Word is, he's rallying his old crew." Abigail loaded her Winchester. "Then we prepare." This town stood against worse. The news ignited debate among the townsfolk in the saloon. Fight or flee? Some argued for negotiation. Hawers' wealth could buy peace. Others, inspired by Sister Eleanor's defiance, called for resistance. "If a nun can stand tall," one rancher said, "so can we." Sister Eleanor addressed the gathering, her voice steady. "Violence begets violence, but injustice unchecked devours all. We choose not war, but defense of what's right." Elijah nodded approval. As plans formed barricades, Watch's moral quandary deepened. At what point does preparation for battle become provocation? The group splintered into factions, some seeing her as a beacon, others as a catalyst for bloodshed. In the quiet hours, Sister Eleanor prayed, not for victory, but wisdom. Her faith, once rigid, now flexible like prairie grass in wind bending, but unbroken. As Hawthorne's forces loomed, spotted on the ridge by scouts, redemption braced. Elijah and Sister Eleanor stood sentinel, their alliance forged in fire. The confrontation promised to test not just their aim, but their convictions. Hawthorne arrived at dawn, a dozen riders at his back, dust billowing like war drums. "Cain, the nun, surrender, or we raise this pit." Elijah shouted back, "Come and try." Gunfire erupted, bullets zipping like angry hornets. Sister Eleanor fired from cover, her shots precise, downing a charger and forcing retreat. Elijah picked off 2, his reputation holding true. Abigail's rifle spoke, echoing the town's resolve. Townsfolk joined, a ragtag militia turning the tide. In the melee, Hawthorne charged, shotgun blazing. Elijah met him, tackling from horseback, the 2 tumbling in a frenzy of punches and curses. Sister Eleanor covered, her Colt barking until empty. As she reloaded, a stray bullet grazed her arm, blood blooming on her sleeve. Pain flared, but she pressed on. Elijah subdued Hawthorne, binding him once more. "It's over." The remnants fled, leaving Hawthorne captured anew. As the sun rose higher, redemption celebrated a victory not just of arms, but spirit. Sister Eleanor bandaged her wound, reflecting violence had its place, but so did mercy. She spared lives where possible, her faith intact. Elijah approached. "You fought like a warrior, and prayed like a saint," she replied. Their bond deepened, a partnership born of shared trials. But whispers of Luke's trial loomed. Would she testify, forgive or condemn? The debate continued, fueling nights of discussion. With Hawthorne recaptured and his remnants scattered to the winds like chaff from a thresher, redemption basked in a fragile peace that felt as tentative as the first green shoots. After a prairie fire, the morning sun climbed high over the jagged outlines of the distant mountains, casting long shadows that seemed to retreat from the town's newfound resolve. Sister Eleanor, her arm bandaged with clean linen from Abigail's stores, stood on the mercantile porch, watching as the sheriff's deputies hauled the bound tycoon onto a reinforced wagon. bound for the territorial courthouse in Carson City. Hawthorne's face, bruised and dirt-smeared, twisted in a snarl of defiance, his gold teeth flashing one last time as he spat curses at the crowd. "This ain't the end, you pious fools. My lawyers will have me out before the ink dries on the charges." Elijah Kane leaned against a post nearby, his Colt freshly cleaned and holstered, his eyes scanning the horizon out of habit. The fight had left him with a split lip and a limp from a twisted ankle, but the aches were familiar companions, badges of survival in a life measured by close calls. "Let him bark," Elijah muttered to Sister Eleanor. "Dogs like him always do when chained." She nodded, her hazel eyes thoughtful, the silver cross at her neck catching the light like a beacon. The events of the past days had transformed her not just outwardly, with the simple dress replacing her habit and a gun belt now cinched at her waist, but inwardly, where faith and ferocity had forged an uneasy alliance. "Words are wind," she agreed, echoing a proverb from her convent readings. "But actions, they echo forever. I never imagined I'd be part of such echoes." Abigail emerged from the store, wiping her hands on her apron, her Winchester slung over her shoulder like an extension of her arm. "Town's buzzing like a hive, child. Folks saying you're the spark that lit the fire against Hawthorne's tyranny. Some even calling for a statuette nun with the gun." Sister Eleanor chuckled softly, a sound laced with irony. "A statue. I'd settle for quiet days and honest work. But first, there's the trial. Luke's and Hawthorne's." The mention of her brother cast a shadow over the moment. Luke Reed, once the notorious Lightning Luke, sat in the local jail, his wounded hand treated by the town doc, his spirit subdued, but not broken. Word had spread of his impending transport to Carson City alongside Hawthorne, where a federal judge would preside over charges of robbery, murder, and extortion. Sister Eleanor's role as witness loomed large. Her testimony could tip the scales toward mercy, or the noose. As the wagon rattled away, escorted by a posse of armed riders, Elijah turned to her. "You ready for what's coming?" Facing him in court, "It won't be easy." She met his gaze, the fire in her eyes undimmed. "Ready as I'll ever be. But it's not just about Luke. It's about justice for the families he's shattered, for the peace I've sought, and for me, to close the chapter on who I was born as versus who I've become." The journey to Carson City took 3 grueling days by stagecoach, through rugged canyons and across sun-scorched plains where mirages danced like deceitful spirits. Sister Eleanor rode with Elijah and Abigail, the latter insisting on accompanying as a chaperone with lead, her rifle never far from reach. The coach bounced over ruts, dust billowing in their wake, while conversations turned to deeper waters, morality of vengeance versus retribution, the line between defending the weak and becoming the aggressor. "One man's justice is another's vendetta," Elijah mused during a midday stop, as they watered the horses at a trickling stream. "I've walked that line too long. Killed for bounties, for survival. But saving you, that felt different, pure, almost." Sister Eleanor sipped from a canteen, her wound throbbing faintly. "Purity's an illusion in this world. Even saints have shadows. My shot at Luke was at justice or familial betrayal. The convent taught forgiveness, but out here, forgiveness without accountability invites more harm." Abigail nodded sagely, her weathered face creased with wisdom earned from decades of frontier living. "Seen it all, I have. Husbands avenging wives, sons burying fathers. Violence cycles like seasons unless someone breaks the wheel. You did that, girl, be choosing the hard path." Their debates sparked introspection, mirroring the broader struggles of post-Civil War America, where former soldiers, freed slaves, and immigrants grappled with rebuilding amid lawlessness. Was violence an inherent sin or a necessary evil against greater injustices? Sister Eleanor's evolving views challenged her companions. Elijah, haunted by his past kills, found solace in her balanced perspective. Abigail, pragmatic to her core, saw validation in her own defensive stance. Arriving in Carson City, a bustling hub of saloons, assy offices, and clapboard courthouses, they found the town abuzz with news of the trial. Posters plastered walls, Lightning Luke and Victor Hawthorne, outlaws on the dock. Spectators flocked from miles around, drawn by the spectacle of a notorious gunman and a corrupt magnate facing judgment. The courthouse, a sturdy brick edifice with a clock tower ticking like fate's metronome, overflowed with onlookers. Judge Harlan Everett, a stern figure with a white beard and gavel-worn hands, presided from a raised bench, his eyes sharp as he called the proceedings to order. This court will hear the cases of Luke Reed and Victor Hawthorne separately, but consecutively. Let justice be blind but thorough. First came Hawthorne's trial, a parade of witnesses detailing his extortions, arsons, and murders by proxy. Miners testified to forced labor, ranchers to stolen lands. Hawthorne's lawyers, slick Easterners in pinstripe suits, argued coercion and lack of evidence. But the tide turned when Elijah took the stand. Mr. Kane, the prosecutor asked, describe the events in Redemption. Elijah recounted the auction, the shootout, Hawthorne's escape and recapture. His voice steady despite the defense's interruptions. He used an innocent woman as bait, orchestrated violence for personal gain. I've seen evil, Judge Hawthorne embodies it. Cross-examination was brutal. You're a killer yourself, Kane. 32 notches, by reputation. Why should we trust a gun for hire? Elijah leaned forward. Because I kill threats, not innocents. Hawthorne preys on the weak. Difference is, I sleep with regrets. He sleeps on silk. Sister Eleanor testified next, her presence in the witness box drawing gasps of former nun. Now in practical attire, speaking of the auction's horror and Hawthorne's trap, he commodified faith, twisted family bonds for profit. Justice demands accountability. The defense probed, you fired a gun, sister. Hypocritical, no. Her response was measured. Self-defense isn't hypocrisy, it's survival. Faith teaches protection of life, mine, and others. Abigail's testimony sealed it, detailing years of Hawthorne's grip on redemption. The jury, a mix of locals weary of tycoons, deliberated briefly before returning guilty on all counts. Judge Everett sentenced Hawthorne to life in the territorial prison, his empire dismantled, assets seized for victims' restitution. As Hawthorne was led away in chains, he fixed a venomous glare on Sister Eleanor. You'll regret this, Holy One. My influence lingers. She met his eyes unflinchingly. Influence fades, truth endures. The courtroom buzzed with approval, but the real test came with Luke's trial. Charged with multiple robberies and homicides, his fate hung precarious. Seated in the dock, bandaged hand in irons, Luke diminished, the lightning in his moniker dimmed. Witnesses paraded, widows weeping for slain husbands, sheriffs recounting chases. Luke's defense pleaded a harsh upbringing, orphaned young, driven to crime by necessity. Elijah testified to Luke's gang's assault on redemption, his voice neutral. He's dangerous, but blood ties matter. He came for familiar guide, but real. The pivotal moment, Sister Eleanor's turn. The courtroom hushed as she approached, her brother's eyes meeting hers with a mix of hope and resignation. State your relation, the prosecutor prompted. Sister to the defendant, she said clearly, but more witness to his path's divergence. She detailed their childhood, poverty, loss, Luke's early protection turning to predation. He taught me to shoot, to survive. But I chose light, he darkness. In redemption, he rode to save me, yet brought death. The defense asked, do you believe in his redemption? She paused, the weight palpable. Belief requires action. Luke, you've caused pain, innocence dead, families broken. But in your eyes, I see the boy who shared his last crust. Turn from this, confess, atone. Justice isn't just punishment, it's restoration. Luke's voice cracked from the dock, Ellie, I'm sorry. For everything. The admission rippled through the court. Luke confessed fully, detailing crimes, naming accomplices. The jury, moved by the sibling dynamic, recommended mercy. Judge Everett sentenced him to 20 years hard labor, with possibility of parole for good behavior. As Luke was escorted out, he nodded to his sister. Thanks, Ellie. Maybe I'll find that light. The trial's end brought catharsis. Hawthorne's fall empowered the oppressed. Luke's sentence offered hope for change. Back in redemption, the town thrived, new businesses sprouted, fear receded. Sister Eleanor stayed, partnering with Abigail in the mercantile, offering counsel to troubled souls, her gun skills reserved for defense. Elijah remained, his wandering ceased, finding purpose in her company. They married in a simple ceremony under the open sky, blending vows of faith and fidelity. Years passed, redemption grew into a beacon of fairness. Sister Eleanor, now Eleanor Kane, bore children who learned both prayer and perseverance. Elijah taught marksmanship with ethics, emphasizing protection over aggression. Reflecting on her journey, Eleanor often said, "Violence is a tool, injustice the enemy. Balance them with compassion, and humanity prevails." Their story became legend, inspiring debates. Does blood determine destiny? Is violence ever justified? In saloons and churches, folks argued, but agreed courage in the face of wrong defines us. And so, in the vast American West, where horizons stretch endless, one woman's choice to embrace her full self forged a legacy of resilient grace. What are your thoughts on the themes of violence and injustice in this story? Do you believe violence can be a necessary response to injustice? Or should nonviolent paths always be pursued? Share your stance in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspectives and spark a discussion.